Hi, my name's Justin Andriozzi. I'm a partner at Lippis Mathias, and I am team leader of our tax and white collar criminal defense team and also our collection defense team. On the tax side, you're constantly working through IRS audits or investigations involving forensic analysis of clients' financial accounts and transactions. So those sometimes lead to broader criminal allegations. Usually it's Bank Secrecy Act violations like money laundering, but sometimes IRS examinations can lead to criminal allegations like obstruction of justice, wire fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, bribery, things like that. The overlap, it comes from both angles. It's not just IRS exams and investigations that lead into other issues, but broader criminal investigations that end up having serious tax implications. And that's where our team comes in and why collaboration amongst our teams is so important. Bringing together those people and those leaders in our tax controversy and our government investigations team provides our clients with a wide range of experience to combat what oftentimes are multifaceted government investigations. The first thing to note is that when a client is dealing with a civil examination by either New York State Department of Tax and Finance or the Internal Revenue Service, that needs to take a back seat to any criminal investigations that are occurring. There's an order of operations to these things, and it's like that for good reason. To list the top three: Fifth Amendment protections, statute of limitations considerations, and then just efficiency considerations for the government. From the Fifth Amendment standpoint, you can't handle your civil examination first or simultaneous to the criminal because you have rights under the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination, your right to remain silent. A taxpayer, a client, needs to adhere to those rights and not make statements that will inevitably be used against them. On the contrary, on the civil side in examination, it's encouraged to be able to cooperate and provide explanations. You can't do those two things at the same time. And so criminal coming first is important because you can utilize those rights. And then after the fact, when the criminal case is disposed of, then proceed and cooperate to a higher level in the civil audit. Likewise, I'd mentioned the statute of limitations. From that perspective, the criminal statute of limitations on tax cases is shorter. But on the civil side, if there's fraud, which is what you're alleging if you're pursuing a criminal case, there is no statute of limitations. The IRS or New York State can go back as far as they want. So assuming they're correct on their allegation of crime or fraud, they will prioritize their criminal case first so that they get it done and indicted within the statute, knowing that they can always fall back on their civil case. Lastly, from an efficiency standpoint, there are legal principles like collateral estoppel and res judicata that make the civil examination much easier for the government if they're able to prevail on the criminal case. So if they can prove that somebody was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in tax evasion, for instance, that will then serve as collateral estoppel on that same issue in the civil examination, where they can say, yeah, this fraud penalty applies and you owe this. We've established it beyond a reasonable doubt, so we don't have to do it again. So between the Fifth Amendment, statute of limitations, the efficiency concerns, generally speaking, the criminal pieces are prioritized and those get the most attention, and then the tax falls in after the fact. That rolls into an important consideration that I see very often amongst individuals who are represented on criminal cases by attorneys that don't know the tax end and what the IRS and or New York State Department of Tax and Finance will do after a criminal case is finalized. So it's crucial to know what's coming. Oftentimes, I will have a client call me that just took a plea, for instance. And I'll use the classic example that I see more often than not are sales tax cases, right? So you could have a great criminal defense attorney helping you get through allegations of what New York State charges as grand larceny or tax evasion. If your attorney works out a deal for you where you agree to a certain amount of tax paid back and you take it without knowing the civil ramifications of that plea, you're going to be caught off guard. Because what will happen is, let's say you're going to pay back $20,000 in sales tax. You pay that $20,000 as restitution. The judge sentences you. You think that that case is over. You've paid your restitution. You're done. What you don't realize is that because you pled to a criminal sales tax issue, there is fraud. That is res judicata. That issue has already been established. And so New York State is going to turn around and they're going to send you a bill civilly where you already paid the tax back, but they're going to apply a 200% fraud penalty. That's what their fraud penalty is in New York State on sales tax, 200%. So that $20,000 now has a $40,000 penalty. And then depending on how far back, maybe that $20,000 was over 3 years. And by the time your case was resolved, it was 5 years ago. You're now looking at 3 to 5 years of interest, which interest in New York State is 14.5%. You might get hit with another $100,000 or more bill, not realizing that that was coming. But if you have counsel that knows that that's coming and handles the tax end, you can bring New York State's civil department to the table and work out what's called a closing agreement that is done in conjunction with your criminal plea. Again, if you have that foresight, you have that experience, you can bring both parties to the table and work out a resolution that's comprehensive that can maybe, in instances, you can get concession on the penalties on the civil side because you haven't taken the plea yet. So there's different ways to work through it that will mitigate the amount that the client has to pay, but more importantly, make sure that the client's making a fully informed decision when they do take that plea.